Now, our main speaker today is our New Zealand guest, Owen Foster. New Zealand had a number of squadrons serving in the European theatre, and Owen was a member of 487 Squadron, which flew Martin Marauders, and he got shot down and spent time in a prisoner of war camp, including a period in the cells with Douglas Bader in Calder's Castle. So it's my great pleasure to ask Owen to come to the rostrum and address this meeting.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now to start off with, I've been listening to some of the experiences of the pilots here, and my experiences don't match theirs at all. I'm afraid very mild compared to what I've been hearing. Now, I joined the Air Force in September 1941, and I won't go through all the training. I will when I got to Canada. When I got to Canada, that was the SFTS. We trained on Cessna cranes. Now, we arrived there on the 2nd of January 1941. Now, 2nd of January 1941. And that was, as you can imagine, right in the middle of winter. So we learned to train, we trained with the flying in icy conditions, snow. Now the snow in Canada at that time is like sugar. You can't make a snowman or snowball out of it. And runways every day, they had the big snow plows going along, sucking the snow off, and big piles on the edge of the runway. Now the course in front of us there was the Aussies. Now the Aussies, one particular morning, there had been a terrific storm during the night, and of course the snow plows had been out and raked the runway. Now the Aussies were training in the morning before us, and when they were coming back in, they hit the runway, and of course on ice, then they'd strike a patch that hadn't frozen over, and of course the planes upside down. Now within 10 minutes, 2 of them arrived like that. So after that, when we were flying in those conditions, we had to fly, I think it was to about 1,000 feet before we folded the undercarriage up. And that was to get the water out of the wheels, because they found out it was the brakes that had frozen up with the water on the runway. And because they're being frozen up, that's what caused the trouble. And also, now when I finished the training there, we were posted to Halifax after our leave, and Halifax was supposed to go on to England. Now when we got to Halifax, we found that the courses were going past us and we were being held. We were being held back for the purpose of opening up a brand new OTU in Nova Scotia, a place called Penfield Ridge. Now, so instead of us getting stale on flying, they sent us out to different, like wireless schools, navigation schools, the staff pilots. Now, the experience we had there was fantastic. I think I've got a list here of all the different aeroplanes that we flew. Yeah, the different aeroplanes that we flew when we were on those staff pilots. The Cessna crane, the Nomad, the Yale, the Ferry battle, the Bolingbroke. The Bolingbroke was the the Canadian version of the Blenheim, the Ventura and the Oxford. Now, also, while we were doing that, we formed, we were posted down to, 3 of us were posted down to Mountain View. Mountain View was on the edge of Lake Ontario, which is just part of from Belleville to Toronto. It was halfway between the two. And we did drogue towing and flying. That was assisted with the Lysander. Did I mention Lysander? Yeah, we got the Lysander. That was used for drogue towing, and then the Ferry battle was used for the gunners for shooting at the drone. And sometimes some of these gunners were bits of wags, and you come back and you might have a bullet hole through the tail of the Ferry battle. where the sights weren't just as accurate as they should have been. But and then with also there, while I was there, we went on to Ferry Command, and we were ferrying aircraft. One place we ferried to was up to Montgelay, which is at the head of the St Lawrence River. And when we're going through Quebec, we used to stop there to refuel. And you go into Quebec, that's French-Canadian, and we had a lot of trouble trying to explain to the ground staff there what we wanted done, what fuel we wanted, especially with the Bolingbroke. The fuel was, we took off with 100 octane, and once we got airborne up high, we changed over to 90. Why? I do not know. And then it was the same when you're coming back to land. On the downward leg, you changed over to 100 octane. But to try and explain that to the ground staff at Quebec was impossible. So the next time round, I took a French-Canadian with me who spoke French, of course, and bugger me, everybody spoke spoke English. So after that, when I went through twice after that, and I just tell them what I wanted, walk away, and I got what I wanted. But the girls there, they sprayed some very strong, terrible scent, and used to get into the cockpit, and they're nearly sick with the smell of the scent they put in. Now, from the Ferry Command, that was one trip on Ferry Command. Another one was taking Blenheims through to Lethbridge. So we used to have to go from Mountain View, where I was stationed, through to Montreal to Kapuskasing, Winnipeg. We stayed the night at Winnipeg, and then on to Lethbridge. And at Lethbridge, the Bolingbrookes were then fitted out with their bomb bays and with gun turrets, and flown across the Rockies to Vancouver. Now also, while I was there, they formed what they called a Bomber Reconnaissance Squadron. That was made up of Blenheims, and there was two of us, New Zealanders, in that squadron. One was chap McGowan and myself, and the rest turned out was civilian pilots came in, so flying bush pilots, you might say, and they came in civvies, and then they got into uniforms, and some of them came out as officers. Well, they were the other part of the Bomber Reconnaissance Squadron, so we had to train these chaps to fly, although they probably had a lot more hours up than we had, but they were on float planes and so on, and we had to train them for flying the Blenheims. And then finally, one of them was a squadron leader. He came out, he must have been a fairly senior sort of pilot. But anyhow, I won't go into all that, but we did one trip up to Kapuskasing, where we had to, Montgelay, it was Montgelay. We were going up there on exercises. And then halfway up, there was, as those of you that have probably flown in Canada, you'll know as you get these storms at certain times of the year, and you can get in them probably 30 seconds, and you're probably out of them again, you're in and out. But those storms are fork lightning, chain lightning, balls of fire, you name it. And McGowan and I were the only Air Force trained chaps, so when you see this, you break away and go on instruments before you got near these places. And it was quite an experience flying through that. You see the props are absolutely blue. Any of all pilots here, surely you've flown through some kinds of storm, electrical storms, and you'll see the props are absolutely blue, and you can smell cordite in the plane. And when we got through the other side, it was only McGowan and I. The others, we didn't know where they were. Anyhow, we got to Montgelay, and we were reported missing. Well, we weren't missing, it was the other 4 bush pilots that were missing. And anyhow, they turned up the next day, and because all they could do, they could fly CPR, which is Canadian Pacific Railways, CNR, Canadian National Railways, or they flew by the St Lawrence River. They didn't have any instrument training whatsoever. So they arrived at Monsley the next day, and they didn't have much to say to us. And when we got back to Mountain View, McGowan and I were taken off that squadron. Well, I went on then from there to a maintenance test pilot, and McGowan went back to ordinary staff pilot on the station. Now the maintenance test pilot, I think I'd much rather have done about 3 ops compared with 1 trip on some of these maintenance test pilots, because, tests rather, there was, I'll just explain, I'll tell you about 2 of them. One was a plane was brought down from Little Norway. Now Little Norway was an island out of Toronto, which was taken over by the Norwegians during the war for training. Well, they brought up a no-man, and that plane had a bad habit of the motor cutting for no reason at all. So the motor was stripped right down and rebuilt, and then rebuilt, and then as a test pilot, a lot of people will know that whoever signs that document to prove that the job was finished and okay, you could ask them to come up with you. So I saw that the flight lieutenant who was in charge of the maintenance there, his signature was on it. So I said to him, right, sir, I'd like you to come up with me. I was only a sergeant pilot at the time. You can come up with me. And because he couldn't say no, because his signature was on that paper. So anyhow, we took off, and I had a list of what I had to do above the aerodrome. We did it above the aerodrome in case the motor cut. And when we landed, it wasn't very well, but being a ground person, but that was okay. We signed it out. The motor never missed a beat. And I went away later on in the day testing another plane, and when I was coming back, when I got into the parking bay, they came rushing over to me, the ground staff, to say, you know that plane that you tested this morning, you can see the smoke away in the distance. 2 Norwegians came up to pick that plane up. The motor cut on takeoff, and they were both killed. Now there was another time when I was testing a Ferry battle. They just put a new motor in. Actually, I'd flown the Spitfire from Montreal, flown somewhere back down to Mountain View, and it was only all they wanted was the frame, because they were training the gunners on the guns on the Spitfire. So they took the engine out and put it in a Ferry battle. And for those of you that know a Ferry battle, it's quite a big aeroplane, and the Spitfire motor, well, the Spitfire's only a reasonably small thing, and I've never flown a plane like it with that motor in it, because it improved the performance of the Ferry battle, no end. But what happened on this other time was there was a Ferry battle, and the motor had been reconditioned, and I had to take it up for a test flight, and I was going up, and as you know, with the Merlins, they only had a cup full of glycol, and when I was going up, the needle was going up, right, to danger, and then it was getting near extreme danger, so I thought, gee, I better get back on the ground quick. So I got back onto the ground quick to the stroke team back landing downwind, and as soon as the speed was slow enough, I did my belts, got out, jumped off, and was still running down. The next thing, up it went. As you know, on the Merlins, they had a little pipe above the engine, about the thickness of your little finger, and when they do explode, that's where it comes up through there. Well, anyhow, they came rushing over the ground crew to see what was the cause of it, and they found the shutters were closed. And I said, no, they're not. The instrument says they're wide open. I had a look, they're wide open on the instrument. So that was the French Canadians again, saboteurs. They crossed the wires, and then there was another time, they crossed the wires, and then another time, this was a Ferry battle I was testing, and one wheel stuck up. And I won't go through the whole performance of all what happened there, but when I landed and they inspected it, they found one wheel, the bolts hadn't been done up tight, they were all loose. So I was very lucky there. But anyhow, then so we'll carry on from there and go to the OTU. And the OTU, they were Penfield Ridge, Nova Scotia. And that's where we crewed up. And I could believe it or not, I had an Aussie with me. The wild salt was an Australian. And so that's where we crewed up. Now I won't go all through there, all our training there. And we went to England as a crew. Now we ended up at Feltwell, Norfolk in England. Now we were posted at 487 Squadron. Now on Feltwell there were 3 squadrons. Number 21, which is RAF, number 464, that was Australian, and the 487, which is New Zealand, and we're all on Venturas on that station. Now what happened? You people read the book, The Gestapo Hunters? That was written by an Australian and written by a pilot from 464 Squadron. Now, a lot of the raids that he mentions on that book on Venturas, the first part of the book is Venturas, the other part's mosquitoes, because we all converted to mosquitoes later on. And a lot of the raids that are mentioned in that book that I was on myself with them, because we used to help each other out on these different raids. And also now, while I'm at Feltwell, I don't know whether you people can remember when our Governor General in New Zealand was addressing some people, and he said, "Gentlemen of the Royal Air Force and men of other services." Well, that created a lot of ill feeling amongst the services overseas. And in London, if any RAF or Air Force people were walking down the streets, there was a lot of abuse and fighting, something going on. So what they did, then they decided that they better mix up some of these people. So with 487 Squadron, they sent down an army captain, and by this time I was an officer, and they, after the briefing, which was to shipping at Rotterdam. Now that was, we classed that as quite an easy target, because we've been in twice before, and this was the 3rd time going in, and there was an island on the entrance into the Rotterdam harbour called Flushing. And unfortunately for this chap that we were taking with us, he was an army chap, and he was a typical army officer, you know, early style boy, hip hip what, you know, and drunk his tea with his little finger in the air. And, but anyhow, he arrived there, and he had his monocle and his stick under his arm, and it was a Sunday, and a beautiful day, and he came out and he said, "Well, it was a lovely day for a flight, isn't it? A beautiful day for a flight." But the commanding officer, he said, "Foster, you've got a passenger this time." Well, we weren't very keen on taking passengers, but they wanted the army to come, somebody from the army to come in and experience what we went through as the Air Force boys. And so they dressed him up, so we put him in the dicky seat alongside there, and away we went. And unfortunately, since the last raid we went on to Rotterdam, they'd fortified Flushing Island, and there was a real ACAC factory there. Well, 6 of us went out and only 3 of us came back. And when we got back, we sunk the ships, by the way. There was 2 ships in there and we sunk them, because 6 of us went out, 6 planes went out, and only 3 of us got back. And our landmark for Feltwell when we came back was the Ely Cathedral. And once we saw the Ely Cathedral, we made it, boys. Another bomb on the side of the plane. And we looked around to this poor army chap. He was sitting there, his hair was on end, his eyes were sticking out, and he was frozen stiff, well, he was scared stiff. They had to get the medical people out to get him out of the plane. And he was in hospital for 3 days. We thought he had shrapnel wounds, but no, unfortunately he didn't. He was dead scared. So the next thing I knew, a week later, I was called out and I was told I had to go down to Harwich to a Navy base, and this is because I'd taken an Army chap up with me. I had to go down to this FC rescue place, and I get down there and I'm showed, oh, beautiful, Ring picked me up. She was lovely, she really was. And I never went to the barracks, and I was supposed to stay there 3 days. And but they showed me where I had to stand on this boat. They had 2 Merlin motors, I think they were FC rescue things. But anyhow, the siren goes while he's showing me, and I had to stand on the rail. I had a life jacket on, and away we went. Well, that was a rough sea. What had happened, the Spitfire pilot's supposed to have bailed out over the channel, and we were supposed to go out and pick him up. We couldn't find him anyhow, but the boat was, don't know what speed it was doing, but all it did was, it was a rough sea. It just hit the top of each wave, and you go, and boy, it's no wonder the Navy chaps are all bandy-legged. But anyhow, when we came back, I said to the chap when we arrived back, I said, you know what you can do with the Navy, I'm heading off back. So I did, and of course the CEO wanted to know what I was doing back so early, and that's what I told him, you know what you can do with the Navy. Now, shortly after that, a week after that, believe it or not, I was looking for those ESC rescue boys, because I was shot down on a raid at Amsterdam. 12 of us went out, 12 planes went out, and of those 12 planes, one turned back because well, I shouldn't say it, but I think he released his escape hatch, and of course his escape hatch had gone, so he had to turn around and we'll go back. Another chap just over the English Channel, his motor caught fire, so he turned around and went back. The rest of us were all shot down. Now that's gone back in history. That was the squadron. We lost every plane in the squadron, and of the 48 people, versus 4 to a crew in the Venturas in England, 5 I believe in the Pacific, there were only 6 of us survived. 3 of them were out of my crew because we ditched in the North Sea, 22 k's out to sea. And of course we were there looking, I was hoping to be able to get back into our own ESC rescue area, but I couldn't make it because my starboard motor was at 45 in the nose. And of course the flak was something terrible, and no, it wasn't flak, sorry, it was fighters, ME-109s and Focke 190s. And they direct hit on my ammunition containers in the front because it blew the nose off, didn't it? And luckily the pilot had other plating behind the instrument panel underneath and up the back. Now Tommy Pant, my navigator, he was, say, standing on the step there, wanting to know why I'd let the bombs go. We were discussing this. Because bang, the nose went, because he shot over the main spar at the back. He was lucky because he was standing out in the open. Now if he'd been there when the containers went off, he probably wouldn't have been with us today. And the Aussie, he was manning the tunnel guns at the back, and he was, when we finally picked up out of the channel, I'll go back to that later on. But anyhow, after we were hit, we dived straight down, followed the canal out. And at the mouth of that canal, there was the pens for the MTB boats. And of course, when we came out and the boats were coming in, of course we weaved out past them, and then you see the traces going past us. But it was shortly after that, because all my fuel tanks were whole, and the fuels were going down there. And so I gave the order, I said to Russell, Russell, clamp the key down. But that means that there's a whistle and they can pick you up, more or less pinpoint where you land in the sea. And he'd no sooner done that, and I said, right, pitching stations, and that was at the motor cup, we were straight in. And I think I got out when the plane was sitting on the bottom of the ocean, because when I managed to get my harness, my gas masks and everything undone, I shot to the surface, but I'd had to take a breath of, well, water, if I should call it, not air under there. Anyhow, I survived. let's put it that way. My three of my crew survived. Tim Warner, my air gunner, unfortunately he was killed in the gun turret early on in the attack. Well, that, so we ended up in the POW camp. We were picked up by a Dutch fishing vessel, half German, half Dutch crew. And those, of course, I ended up in hospital. I've got a bit of a bump in my head here, a bit of a hollow somewhere. We ended up in hospital in Amsterdam. And then Russell, he was lucky, my air gunner. That's right, when we ditched, the first thing they jettisoned was the door, because the door had the dinghy in there, but that was useless, it was full of holes. And of course, they managed to get Tim Warner out, my air gunner, managed to get him out of the turret, out the door, before it actually sunk properly. And now Tim was buried, he was washed ashore 3 days later on the Dutch coast, and he's buried there. But the rest of us, as I say, were lucky, picked up, we ended up in hospital, and then we went to solitary confinement. Now my story is the POW camp is very similar to the gentleman's that spoke before. When you get the swimming pools and the ice and the entertainment and the different things we went on, wooden beds, and we used our slats for our tunnel. See, we were involved with the Great Escape, but when we did the Great Escape, we had 3 tunnels going, not the one. We had 3 tunnels, all within the wire length, or the safety wire. And then the idea then is they dug furiously and weren't very fussy about distributing the sand. The penguins, did you have the penguins that distributed sand in tunnels?
We didn't have a tunnel. I went down the campaign drainage street.
Oh, I see.
Already dug.
Oh, well, we had the 3 tunnels, Tom, Dick and Harry. Now, the idea was they worked flat out there, and they weren't very careful about distributing the sand. They wanted the Germans more or less to find it, because they'd think, right, it's going to take them another 2 years or a year to get another tunnel out to that wall, not realising we had 3 tunnels there. And that's when the main break went. Now, just before the main break, there was 19 of us called out for their POW to be counted in the morning. And so after that, they called out certain names to form in the middle of the parade ground. So they called these names out, and we were all looking around, and we thought, oh, they're all part of the Great Escape, or all part of Big X, as we used to call it. And then my name was called out, my word, and then there were 19 of us anyhow, and a whole lot of us, including, I don't know whether you've read about Robert Stanford Tuck. He was an RAF chap, Fleet Commander, and he was with us too, and he was all part of the Great Escape. And also, going back a wee bit, I worked with an Australian called Al Hake. Now, I think Al Hake's written a book too. And Al Hake, we were with him making compasses. Now, to make our compasses, they were gramophone records, gramophone needles and razor blades, and the gum out of stumps of trees that were being chopped down in the camp. But anyhow, that's right, that was all part of the escape part, because everybody had compasses. Now, we had the date set for that escape. It was going to then go flat out, and that was the big escape, the Great Escape. You've probably heard about it, seen it on TV and so on. And Len Trent, he was the last man out. Well, Len Trent was the leader of our squadron, and he got the VC for that air raid that we're all shut down on, which we know, I shouldn't say it really, but that was all, it wasn't true of what he said, because he got a pen and eye, a navigator and eye, and he told us what happened. Well, we were behind him, we saw him blow up, and we flew through his debris. But I always thought that was another chap, McGowan. It was a chap named Ray Kitching in England, who was writing a book on the 487 Squadron on that raid. And everything that he asked me or filled in, he went over to Holland and followed the course and followed everything and so on, because the nose of my aircraft ended up, it was on the main street in Amsterdam, and I believe it's in a museum over there somewhere. One chap, Bino, he saw it, but it's like us. I'm very involved with the Air Force Museum at Wigram, and so we changed some of our cabinets fairly frequently, and evidently they do that in Holland. But anyhow, I ended up, that's right, and then, okay, now we go back. I won't go any further into that lot. We go back now to the forced march that we had. Now on here, I had to put the dates down. We got transferred, those 19 of us were transferred to Valeria. And when we were all loaded onto the truck, we all thought we were going to be shot because we're all part of the Big X. And the date was set for the escape and everything. So when we were at Valeria and the date for the escape was, we all thought it was a lucky so-and-so's are all getting out. My number was 121 to come out. But when they got to 73, I think it was, that's when they found the escape hole. But anyhow, that's in Valeria. Now, the camp life in Valeria is very similar to what the gentleman was saying there. But now we go back, I've got the dates, I took those out of I've written my war memos. So these are out the dates I've got. January the 27th, 1945 at 2100 hours. We were called out and told to get ready to get on the road and march in front of the Russians that were getting quite close to us. And it was very pathetic to see all the peasants going along the streets there, or the road, with pulling carts, pushing carts, prams, horses and buggies and everything. And this was going on for a few days before they told us we had to get out. Well, then that was cancelled, and we all went back because we'd more or less trashed our building, and also we'd built sledges and what have you when we went back, because there was snow and blizzard at the same time, as you can imagine. January the 27th, the middle of their winter over there. And so when we went, it was 7 o'clock next morning that we had to go out. So as we went out the gate, they issued us with a Red Cross parcel. Now, what can you do when you've got all your belongings? I had about 3 pairs of socks on and a couple of balaclavas and so on. And we started the march, finally, that's on the 27th, yeah. And then on the 28th, we started the march, and we went to Kunau, which was 22 k's. We had to march in a blizzard, walking straight into a blizzard with the balaclavas. You had icicles hanging out, icicles off your eyelashes, and it was cold. And we ended up in a building, just nothing much for that night. And then the next day, the 29th, we went on to Gross Shelton, which was 17 k's away. Now, Gross Shelton, that was we met up with some, what they call Panzer Division, and tanks, and what have you, and they were the cream of the German tank corps, and they were all out of fuel. They couldn't shift. And so we did a bit of bartering with what cigarettes we had, but also marching there on the road in front of us was the people from Stalingrad 3 in Squadron. That's where we were to start off with, Stalingrad 3. And, going back to Stalingrad 3, I was in a room and shared a room with Bader. Now, somebody was here who saw Bader or knew Bader or met Bader's wife. Who was that? was good on you. How well did you know Bader?
Oh, I never met Bader.
Oh, you didn't? Well, you didn't miss anything. Bader caused us a lot of trouble, and we've been watching in the papers, a few of us, in books, and there's been nothing detrimental mentioned in any of the books of his war memoirs or the history or about Bader himself, that of what kind of a gentleman he really is, or really was. Because in Stalag War 3, the Gestapo used to do spot checks, and this particular day we'd only just been issued with our barley soup, and the Gestapo come in. And Bader, he got a bowl of soup and opened the door just a wee bit, put the soup in there, because the Gestapo chap comes in with his stick against the lock, didn't he? And which wasn't he wasn't very pleased about. So he cancelled all our food parcels for a month, and we just lived on the German rations. So some of the boys in the room next to us, I believe, because in a POW camp, as you all know, you see nothing, hear nothing, and know nothing. And I was asked if I could, because I was in a bunk above Bader, and asked if I could get Bader's legs from because at night naturally he took them off. And so I got his legs. This particular day, wait till he was snoring. He wasn't a very pleasant sort of a noise coming from his bed at night. And I managed to get his legs, and there was somebody waiting outside the door. I wouldn't know who it was. They disappeared. He wakes up in the morning and all hell loose, the legs loose, no legs. And he created such a fuss that some of the boys got hold of him and threw him into these fire pool, big water tanks they had there, in case of fire, threw him in there. And different ones walking past just come in to drown you, bugger, drown. But nobody had helped him out because he didn't have any legs, but the Jerrys fished him out and finished. And then what happened, they were going to send a plane over from England with a spare pair of legs. And then the boys thought, no, they're not going to let the crew come over with another legs for Bader of all people. And so they said, well, I think it was about time Bader got his legs back. So I was told to be outside the door, legs are on, put them outside the bed. And he woke up in the morning, Bader, put his legs on, so nothing had happened. And anyhow, so after that, I'll just go ahead a bit. He came out to New Zealand representing the Shell Oil Company. I don't know whether he came to Aussie. He did. Yeah, well, he came to New Zealand representing the Shell Oil Company. Myself, Bravo Club members, we decided to put on a bit of a show for him, or the committee did, not me, or Frank Rees or some of the others that had anything to do with him. And so, anyhow, we saw him sitting on the steps to the stage. He was just there all on his own. So Rees said, come on, Foster, we'll go up and talk to Bader. So we said to Bader, do you remember us? And you know, he flatly denied anything that we mentioned about his escapade, about his legs and the POW camp and everything like that. So Frank Rees pointed to him, I won't tell you people, there's ladies here, what he said and walked away from him. So he hadn't changed. But anyhow, that's just diversing about. How far did I get? Oh yeah, there was Shelton, 17 k's away. And now on the 30th, we were all day there because, as I say, the Germans were out of fuel. They couldn't shift their tanks. Now the next day, 31st, we went to Birkenstead, which is 13 k's away. Now by this time, it started to thaw out. Now sledges weren't much good at all because on these roads. So we had to do away with our sledges, and what food we we carried ourselves. Then a lot of people too discarded a lot of the food they had. And then, Birkenstead, and the 1st of February, the next day, we were all day there again. Now on the 2nd of February, we went to Schoenheim, which was 27 k's away. Now that night, we slept on a farmer's farm in these barns, and on that night, believe it or not, I slept with pigs and they were the cleanest and the warmest night I had sleep for a long time. They were really good. There's another chap, yes, and there's another chap written a book about in the logbook on this march that we were on, and the only thing we differ in is that he slept with cattle, I slept with pigs, and then also we were told right from the word go at night, always we were told to sleep with our boots on, otherwise in the morning your boots would be frozen stiff and you wouldn't be able to get them all because we'd have to be large. On the 7th, you're 7th of May, where were you? Wittenberg. I was at Springburg. No, I wasn't. I was at Hildesheim. Then that was VE night.
I flew home from Hildesheim.
Yeah, well, we were at Hildesheim. I flew back from the Hildesheim to Ford and Hatfield. Ford, we flew to Ford, which was Hatfield in England.
No, we landed at Westport.
Oh, different one. But anyhow, then we were shown home, and then we went to Springburg, which was 7 k's away. Now, in Springburg, we caught a train. They put us in cattle trucks, and we were packed in there so tight that you couldn't sit down. So, but there we went, in that train, we went then to Luckenwalde. Now, Luckenwalde was a concentration camp with the Russians. All the Russian prisoners of war there, a concentration camp. Now, I won't go, the experiences there were practically the same as what you had. But now, there was, while we were there was a raid on London, what they called the night raiders, where the British did the night raiding and the Americans did the daylight raids. But one of the guards fired a shot, and we used to walk around the perimeter to try and get some exercise, keep our blood circulating sort of thing. And Frank Reese used to come with me, walking around. This time Frank couldn't come, he had something else, doing something else, so except Wally Shostak came with me. Now Wally was a Russian-born American, and he came with me. We were walking around, we heard a shot, and looked up, and here was this guy just putting his rifle down. I turned around to Wally to say, Wally, what that was about? He was dead, wasn't he, alongside me. And we found out that that German had just got word from Berlin that the whole of his family was wiped out on a British raid during that night. And so he was taking it out on anybody, just find it. So luckily he picked him, not me, that's why I'm still here. And but we were released by the Russians on the 22nd of April, 1945. Now we were released, and you said about the American convoy. Well, we had the American convoy come into us too, and this was about a fortnight later, and they said we were all lined up to get on these trucks, and the next thing they said, no, sorry, they haven't got word from Moscow to say that we could go. So quite a few of us that dared to, we made a rush for the trucks, dived over the side as weak as we were, and at the same time the drivers of these trucks were mostly Negroes, and they just put their foot down and away they went. We hid under the seats of that, and they just kept going through the towns, cross over the Elbe, then they took their foot off the Acceleroad. And so that was there on, that was May the 7th, because we were at that place, and that was the first decent meal we'd ever had. We were just there for the night. And another thing, I'll just diverse a wee bit on that. At that place, Hildesheim, there's next door to the aerodrome, there's a big building, 3-story building. Now that building housed the, how can you put it? It was the Swedish woman, great, good, big, buxom woman, and they were trying to raise the Aryan race, which was the pure German, would it be, Aaron Rice? And so they were mating them up like you do with stud cattle, with the pick of the Panzer Division. And so when in the museum, Air Force Museum, we get a lot of Germans through the Air Force Museum, and my question is to a lot of them, what happened to that experiment that Hitler was doing with Aaron Rice? And he said, well, they were all, right at the end of the war, transferred to Mexico, and he said they've all turned out to be a lot of zombies. So it didn't work out at all with the genes or whatever it had. So that was a failure. Now, yes, I was released by the Russians April 22nd. But I think, have I spoken for 20 minutes? I don't think so. Okay. Well, I'll let it go at that. And there's a lot more you could say, but a lot more you could say, but you don't know where to stop.